All right, welcome to the Explainer. Companies are pouring billions of dollars into diversity, equity, and inclusion. We all call it DEI. But here's the crazy part. What if those programs with all the best intentions actually make things worse? Yeah, it happens. Today, we're going to dig into this surprising thing called DEI Backfire, and, more importantly, how you can stop it from happening. Let's jump in.
So here's what we're covering. First, we'll look at when good intentions can backfire. Then we'll get into the science of why it happens. After that, it's all about solutions: smarter recruitment, better training, real accountability, and finally, how to align and evaluate everything. First up, let's talk about the problem. Okay, section 1, when good intentions backfire. It sounds kind of crazy, right? How can something designed to bring people together actually push them further apart? You've probably heard this saying before, and honestly, it just hits the nail on the head here. This is the core of what researchers call DEI backfire. It's this bizarre situation where an initiative that's supposed to improve things, well, it does the exact opposite. Sometimes it even makes things worse than when you started. And look, getting this wrong it's a really expensive mistake. We're talking about a staggering $8 billion spent every year in the US just on diversity training. Now, with that kind of cash on the line, you've got to be sure it's not just, a waste of money. You have to be sure it isn't actively doing damage. And this stuff isn't just theory. It happens in the real world. Take a look at these examples. Coca-Cola got a ton of heat for a training module that told employees to be less white. Instead of promoting inclusion, it just created more division. And then there's Wells Fargo. They had to scrap a whole policy when it turned out managers were doing sham interviews, pretending to interview diverse candidates for jobs that were already taken. Can you imagine? Talk about completely destroying trust.
All right, so we get it. Backfire is real and it's expensive. But the big question is why? Why does this happen? Let's get into the science of it.
So let's put a formal definition on this. DEI backfire is basically when a program completely misses the mark and ends up doing the exact opposite of what you wanted. It's like, imagine you launch a program to hire more women in tech, and a year later, you actually have fewer women on the team. That's backfire. And it's not like this is some rare freak occurrence. It can pop up in some of the most common DEI efforts. For example, that mandatory diversity training. If people feel forced into it, it can actually make them more prejudiced. The way you talk about DEI. If you're not careful, it can accidentally make stereotypes seem normal. Even trying to recruit specific groups can backfire if managers feel like you're taking away their autonomy and forcing their hand. So what's going on inside our heads that makes this happen? Well, a huge piece of the puzzle is something called social identity theory. It's really just a fancy way of saying that we, as humans, are wired to form groups. An us and a them. It's a totally natural instinct. But in the workplace, it can be a recipe for tension. It's kind of the psychological trigger for a lot of this backfire. Okay, so research points to 3 big unintended signals that really set off this backfire effect. First, when an initiative makes it seem like a certain group needs special help to succeed, that can actually reinforce negative stereotypes. Second, if it sends the message that people will get promotions or jobs no matter what their qualifications are, that creates a huge sense of unfairness. And the third one is a bit sneaky. It's when a company seems so progressive and moral on the surface that people feel like they've earned a moral credential, basically a free pass to let their own little biases go unchecked. All right, so that's the problem. And I know it can sound kind of bleak, but here's the good news. The same research that points out all these problems also gives us a playbook for the solutions. So the big question is, how do we get this right? Let's get into the 5 big recommendations.
First up, recommendation number 1, smarter recruitment. This is all about how you bring people into the organization in the first place, and how to do it without setting off any of those backfire alarms we just talked about.
Really, this boils down to one simple idea: being authentic. You want to avoid what some researchers call counterfeit diversity. That's when you kind of fake it, making your company look more diverse in your recruiting ads than it actually is. That just breaks trust, and people end up leaving. The opposite approach, and the one that works, is a realistic job preview. You're just honest. You tell people the good and the bad about the job and the culture. It sounds simple, but it builds incredible trust and leads to people who are much happier in their roles.
So, to put this into practice, here are the 3 big things to do. First, give every candidate that realistic job preview. Be real with them. Second, get your managers involved and actually give them the power to make hiring decisions. Don't just dictate to them. And third, be super, super clear that every decision is based on merit. Define your standards and stick to them. Okay, on to recommendation number 2. Let's tackle that $8 billion elephant in the room: diversity training. The trick here is to make it smart and context conscious, not just some mandatory chore that everyone has to sit through. The whole mindset needs to shift from control to empowerment. So instead of a separate, mandatory DEI session that feels like a punishment, why not weave these topics into the training you're already doing, like leadership development or new hire onboarding, and really focus on the learner. Give them support, and even better, give them choices. Microsoft is a great example. They let employees build their own learning paths around this stuff, which makes people way more engaged. So, you've got smarter recruiting and better training. That's a fantastic start. But honestly, it's all for nothing without our third recommendation: real, actual accountability. This is about building the structures right into your company that make success possible. Look, it's pretty simple, right? People are just more likely to pay attention to their biases if they know someone is watching. So, how do you build that accountability? Step 1. It has to come from the very top. Your leaders need to walk the walk. Step 2, you have to make it official. That means creating actual DEI plans, putting together task forces, maybe even hiring dedicated DEI managers. And step 3, which is crucial, you have to have a safe, fair grievance system so all employees know they have a place to go if something is wrong. All right, we're going to bundle our last 2 recommendations together because they're totally intertwined. It's all about aligning DEI with your company's core mission and then evaluating your progress constantly. This is how you weave DEI right into the fabric, the DNA of your organization. So how do you get that alignment? Well, you have to talk about it, obviously, in meetings and workshops, but the real key is making it part of your culture, not something you force on people. The best way to do that is to tie your DEI goals directly to your company's core values. And you need your senior leaders to be the ones explaining why this matters to us, to our company, not just because it's the trendy thing to do. And that brings us to the second part, evaluation. And listen, this is probably one of the most important takeaways from this whole explainer. It's not enough to just measure diversity. You have to measure inclusion. It's the difference between just counting how many different kinds of people you have and measuring whether those people actually feel like they belong. And this chart right here shows you exactly why that matters so much. I mean, look at this. You could be hitting 85% of your diversity hiring goals and be patting yourself on the back. But if your inclusion climate score, how people actually feel, is down at 45%, you've got a massive problem. You've basically assembled a diverse team that feels unwelcome. And that, my friends, is a perfect storm for backfire. So the fix is to evaluate this stuff at every level. You need to tie DEI goals into managers' performance reviews, make sure it's part of the company's long-term game plan, and I'm going to say it again because it's so important. Listen to your employees. Use their feedback to figure out what your inclusion climate really is. Don't just rely on the numbers. So there you have it. We've looked at the problem, the psychology behind it, and 5 concrete ways to get DEI right. If there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that good intentions just aren't enough. It's all about thoughtful, smart implementation. Which leaves me with one final question for you to think about. What's one backfire risk that you can help prevent where you work? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.